So you can probably see from the title, it's called Daily Guided Journaling. So that's pretty much what I'm going to be talking about. I've been writing content for my daily email newsletter for about 4 months now. And one of the themes that keeps coming up is journaling. So much so that every day in my newsletter, I include a daily journaling prompt. And the whole point of that is to just give people something to think about each day. But I think I've got about 550 members on my newsletter, and I'd almost bet money that not one of them, potentially not one of them, is actually doing that daily journaling. Now, the reason I love journaling is because it gives us space and time. It gives us the time to think about what we want in life, to analyse why we do the things in life. It effectively acts a bit like a counsellor or a coach, but it's self-guided counselling and coaching. And in no way is this a replacement for counselling or coaching. So a counsellor will always be able to ask you questions that you never think to ask yourself. They're trained to listen to the words that you use and analyse those words in a way that you'd never even question your own wording. So it's not a replacement for counselling or coaching, but it can be a really good addition, especially for people who aren't in counselling or coaching. It's definitely worth taking that time to look after yourself and give yourself the space to do this. Because if you think about how often do we actually stop and think about what do we want from life, why do we do the things we do, it's actually almost never. I was trying to think about how often I analyse my own thoughts, my own feelings, and I'll do it when something comes up maybe, but I never really take the time to make that happen. So I was thinking to myself, how on earth can I get into that habit of journaling for myself? And that's what this is about. I thought I'd start talking about it, and hopefully some people will engage with it. But if not, if it's just me, it's just me. So the great thing about journaling is it gives you space and time. Now by time, I mean literally a block, and it only has to be a few minutes each day to think about what we want. So it's a structure. You don't even have to necessarily journal, but it is a commitment to taking some time out for ourselves to work out what we want, what we need, etc. And the space, what I mean about that is just as if we're in a counselling or coaching session, that is space. And how you use it is entirely up to you, but we're creating an environment where our brain gets into a certain mode of thinking. It starts to question things, it starts to open up a bit, hopefully, to really expand our thinking. So that's what it's for. It's to give us the space, the environment, the mindset, and the time to think about it. That's why I love journaling. Now, there are 5 different types of journaling that I've come across. So it's worth running through a few of them now. Free writing. This is the traditional keeping a diary kind of journaling. So we just write about whatever comes up for us. It might be whatever's gone on during the day. We can analyse it. It's very effective. But it's very much about current affairs, about what's current in our life and our brain and what's going on for our relationships. We can expand on that slightly by going to the second form of journaling, which is the stream of consciousness. Now, this is where we're not trying to structure it. We're not trying to tell the brain what to think. We just write down whatever comes into it. Sometimes it's total gibberish. Sometimes it's insightful just to see what kind of madness our brain produces. So that can be quite good fun. That's stream of consciousness. I wouldn't recommend that as a regular thing. But if you stick with me over the next couple of weeks, we're actually going to give that a go at some point and just see what kind of nonsense our brains come out with. Because also it can really reveal what's going on underneath when you give your brain complete freedom just to express itself. Okay, so that's stream of consciousness. The third version is gratitude journaling. If you've been reading my email newsletters, then you've probably come across this. So gratitude journaling is where we try to limit our thoughts and expressions to things that are generally pretty positive. There's things we're grateful for, things we appreciate. And there's real art to doing that as well. So it's not simply a case of saying, I'm really grateful for my kids, because that gets pretty boring pretty quickly. If you every day you're writing down, I'm grateful for my kids, after a while it just becomes a meaningless platitude that you just say. So with gratitude journaling, we try to get as specific as we can. We hone down into moments. So each day you're going to have different experiences. And so if you're trying to gratitude journal, you can journal the experiences, the moments. Things like, I'm really grateful for the moment my kid came and hugged me this evening because it just felt warm and snuggly, and perhaps they do appreciate me after all. And because you have different experiences each day, you can have a different appreciation each day. And that's how we can make gratitude journaling less repetitive, but also more powerful, because we then start to work out, why do we appreciate that very specific moment? What did it do for us? What did it remind us of? Why did we value it? So that's the third version. The fourth version of journaling is when we get a bit practical. So we start thinking in terms of planning. We analyse the week that's coming up, and we look potentially for pitfalls. So things that are going to cause us anxiety, things that are going to cause us stress. If you've got a work meeting or something coming up, or you know that on Thursday night you're going to be busy all evening, so you're not going to have any food prepared. So we can get really practical sometimes with journaling. And that can be really handy, because if you plan for a week ahead and you know what's coming up, then if you've taken some steps and you're saying, actually, I know that on Thursday afternoon, I'm going to buy some healthy food so that I can just eat while I do that meeting on that Thursday evening. And that planning can make a huge difference. We often just assume that we can jump from day to day to day and just go with the flow. But if we can plan, certainly for anything that's going to bring in anxiety and stress, then we can essentially pre-plan how we're going to respond. We can talk ourselves into a better state of mind if we need to. So that's planning. We get very practical. And the fifth version is guided journaling. So this is where we get really proactive with our journaling. So we don't just depend on what's coming up during the day. We don't just look at what is occurring for us, what's happening to us. Now we start to think, well, what do I actually want to think about? What's the stuff I want to work on to improve my life, to improve my anxiety, my stress? So the guided journaling is very much, we pick a topic and we go with it and we see where it leads. So it's not a case of only answering that question. What we do is we start off with a theme or a topic, or maybe a couple of questions that we're going to try to answer, and we go with the flow. We let the brain start to answer it, and then we follow the thread all the way down. And it can be very effective. This is where I think that journaling really takes off. So it's no longer just the free writing where it's just whatever's current. It's not a stream of consciousness. It's not just gratitude. We can get really deep with this stuff. It's effectively doing the same kind of work you might do with a counselor or coach, but attempting to do it yourself. As I said, it's not going to be a replacement for that, but it is going to be a really good second substitute for it. Okay, so if you're not in counseling coaching, guided journaling is a great way to start improving your life. So that's a lot of the focus of what we're going to be doing over the next month, is that. So you've probably got the idea that I love journaling. I love the idea of journaling. I write about journaling a lot. I tell people to journal. I get all my clients to journal if there's something specific I want them to work through and that they want to work through. I even give daily journaling topics in my newsletter. But what I don't do is journal. So I give this idea of journaling to everyone else and I put it out in the world, but I don't actually do it myself. So that's what this is about. I just wanted to give myself the time and the space to journal, to get into the habit. So I plan to do this every day. every weekday for a month at the same time each day. So you can join in if you want or not. It's going to get potentially a bit weird because once we start journaling, which we're going to do today in a few minutes, it's going to be pretty much 15 minutes of silence. Okay, so we're just going to write for 15 minutes. I know it's a bit weird for Facebook Live that we're not going to say anything. There's not going to be any interruptions, but the idea is we're going to give ourselves 15 minutes of space and time just to write a journal. All right, so how do we do journaling? The first thing is pen and paper, okay? There's been some research into this, and pen and paper is always more effective than actually typing or using your phone. It might be something to do with the fact that when you're manually writing with a pen, it helps the brain go straight from the thoughts and feelings onto the paper. So we're externalizing much more effectively than if we're typing. Whether that's true or not, how much is true, who knows? The general advice is use a pen and paper if you can rather than typing, and a phone is probably going to be even less effective. But if that's what you've got to hand, do it, okay? Just go with whatever you can. There is another reason we say pen and paper as well, and that's so we can have a dedicated journal. So ideally, you'll have a book. It might be a nice journal. You might have a dedicated pen. So this is not a particularly nice pen, but I have actually got a nicer pen upstairs that I would, in fact, I'll probably bring it down tomorrow. So the idea is that we have a pen that we specifically dedicate to journaling. So just as we train ourselves at anything else, when we're stepping into journaling mode, we want the brain to open up. We want to train it so that it gets into this expansive, judgment-free, compassionate, explorative mode. So by having a dedicated book, dedicated pen, when we pick those up, the brain goes, I know what this is, we're journaling. So it calms down, it changes the way it's thinking, it gets out of its anxiety mode and hopefully gets into an explorative mode. Now there is a downside to using a book, and that is that people can potentially read it. So one of the big issues with journaling is if we think anyone else will ever read it, we start writing for that person instead of writing for ourselves. So if there's any danger of someone reading this, don't use a book, just use a piece of paper and destroy it immediately afterwards. So we're not writing for posterity, we're not writing to have it published. We never ever want anyone else to read it, and we destroy it immediately because we want absolute privacy so that we can write down whatever we want. So to give you an example, supposing you've been to a party and you've revealed something or said something about your partner that you shouldn't have said. You've realized that if they knew, this would hurt them. Now, if you want to journal that and work out why you did this, who were you trying to impress, what's the damage, what would you do in future, if you know that there's even a tiny chance that at some point they will read that in your journal, you're not going to write it down. Or if you do write it down, you're going to be writing in lots of nonsense to make it sound like it's not as bad as it is. So that's why we don't want to have any chance of anyone reading it, okay? Because we want to be completely open and honest about our thoughts in a judgment-free zone. So if there's any chance of someone reading it, just write it down and then instantly destroy it, okay? No evidence it ever existed. Because the last thing we want to do is start writing for other people. It has to be private, has to be for us. And if you ever wanted to share something from the journal, for instance, if you wanted to send me some thoughts or whatever, don't send the actual journal. Write a new version, a pre-seed version, and make sure that you're cutting out everything that's too private, anything that's revealing. Just cut that out. So that's a little tip for that. All right, so I mentioned there keeping it judgment-free. When we're analysing ourselves, we can tend to get quite harsh. We can get very critical of ourselves. So one of the things here is that this is supposed to be a supportive environment. Same as if you were with a counsellor or a coach, the aim is to be as open as you can, to be as judgment-free as you can. Just state things as they are. If you start getting critical, then it can go two ways. You can get really negative and drag yourself down, or it can kind of cause you to start making excuses and pretending things aren't the way they were. What we really want is as much openness as we can, so we get right down to the crux of why we actually do things, not the usual nonsense stories we tell ourselves. So we're trying to get beyond the stories and get to the truth. That's the point of journaling. In fact, it's one of the really nice things about journaling is that when you write stuff down, quite often you think, well, that's just nonsense. Why on earth would I ever have thought that? And yet we can have had the same thought in our head for months, but writing it down lays it out and gives us the opportunity to say, this is junk. Why on earth would I ever think this? Stupid. So it's really effective. I love it. Another aspect of this is when you're journaling, try to let your mind go as free as you can. So yes, we might have a journaling direction, we might have a prompt, a question or asking, but don't try and limit to that. Use that as the starting point and let your brain and your exploration go wherever it needs to go. So one of the great things about this is that it is the time for your brain to bring up what it needs to bring up. So there's always stuff in the background that we're suppressing or hiding or avoiding, and this is the time for it to come forward. So just because you've asked a question about, say, your diet, and you're thinking, why am I not eating well? And that might be your prompting question. But you don't know the real reasons for that. So one of the ideas here is that we just let the brain explore wherever it wants to go. Because you might find out that actually it's work pressure is why you're not eating properly. So treat it like a journey of discovery, not a way to force the brain in a particular direction. And the final aspect of journaling that we have to do is habit. So you can use journaling just when something comes up and you want to analyze it and work out what's going on, but it's much more effective when we make it a regular habit. So in the past, when I've actually managed to make it a habit, it makes a big difference because every day you know that you can add a little bit more, you can discover a little bit more, and your brain gets into the habit of exploring just that a little bit more, a little bit deeper. And it builds up on the previous day because you've maybe learned a little bit more about yourself on the Monday. So when you get to Tuesday, now your brain's like, well, we discovered that yesterday. What else is there on top of that? And it can start to create a flywheel, a continuous growth. And that habit, of course, is why I was saying we're going to be doing this every day, every weekday at 12:30. So if you want to join me for some journaling, brilliant. All right, so we're going to get started. We're going to do 15 minutes. I've got a little timer set up. We're just going to sit here in silence for 15 minutes and journal. Now, one of the things I like to do for this is to create some space, because if it's lunchtime, what we find is that we're coming into the time with everything that's happened in the morning. So all the pressures of work, all the busyness, the emails, the notifications, etc., that's all still in here. So what we want to do is try and create a blank page, a new break in the day to create some distance between all of the anxiety of the morning and our current state of mind. We want to create that. And one of the really effective ways I found for this is just breathing, doing 3 to 5 slow, deep breaths. And it creates the space. So do it with me. 3 breaths in through the nose, into the belly, and out through the mouth, nice and slow. So on the way in, we're trying to breathe it down into the belly. And we're calming everything on the way out. So as we breathe out, we're just releasing any anxiety, all the to-do lists, the pressures, all of that gets released. And what we're trying to do is breathe into the belly. That means not breathing into the chest. And you know if you're chest breathing, because it feels a bit shallow, it feels quite high up here, it might feel a bit raggedy. What we want to do is keep breathing in until we feel the top of the belly starting to expand as well. And really drag out that outward breath so it just calms everything. It releases. And it only takes 3 to 5 of these very conscious breaths to just calm the whole system. You can probably hear that my voice has actually slowed down just a little bit. My brain is just entering a nicer, calmer state. I know I've been talking for about 20 minutes, but it's now calming it down, releasing it a bit. So we're going to step into this. The first topic I want to look at for today, just to give us something to start with. We're going to keep it pretty general, pretty open, pretty easy, so we're not going to go too deep. The question is, how well have I looked after myself for the last few days? So we're just going to take, it could be the last week, it could be over the weekend and the Monday. How well have I looked after myself? That's what we're going to answer, all right? Now, this is the kind of question where we have to watch out for the negative bias. It can feel like there's an implicit thing of criticism in here that we're going to look for all the ways in which we didn't look after ourselves. But ideally, we're going to balance this out. Okay, so we're definitely going to look at the ways in which we didn't look after ourselves. We're also going to very, very deliberately look for the ways in which we did look after ourselves. So there's going to be, it can be harder to spot those because they tend to be habits. So the routines we're in, those healthy routines, that's what we're trying to identify here a bit. So for instance, when I wake up in the morning, I have a protein bar and a coffee, and I have some time to sit and write before I go off and teach a spin class later on. But I have that good 45 minutes of creative time, and that feels very healthy for me. And because I have that as a routine each day, that works really well for me. So that's the kind of thing I might record. But it's very easy to miss it if it's a daily routine that's healthy, because you think, well, that's not something I did or didn't do deliberately, because I didn't have to think about it, because it's just what I do every day. So make sure you include as much of the positive stuff in here as well. And when you find something that's a negative, that you think, actually, that wasn't particularly healthy, then it's time to start analysing. You can ask, why did I do that? What did I get out of it? Is it actually unhealthy? Because sometimes we assume these things are unhealthy, but actually, they're neither here nor there. So we just dig deeper, work out why you did it, and finally, would you do it again? What would you like to do differently? Would you modify it? Or actually, if it's something that just gives you pleasure, is that a bonus? Is that a good thing? In fact, can you just give yourself permission to do that thing in the future without the implicit criticism? Okay, so that's our topic. How well have I looked after myself for the last few days? So if you haven't got a pen, go and grab one, and we're going to sit here for 15 minutes and just write. I don't know if 15 minutes is going to be too long. We're going to try it out. So I'm going to start my little timer. Off we go. How well have I looked after myself for the last few days? So that's our 15 minutes up. I hope actually that you found that useful. I know it's a bit weird sitting there for 15 minutes in silence with me writing, but hopefully you've been doing it too. So I had a couple of questions I was going to ask at the end of this. What did it feel like to have that time to write? You know, if it's your first time experiencing journaling or your first time writing it down for a while, what did it feel like? Did it feel weird? Did it feel awkward? Mine felt a little bit awkward, I have to say. I've realised, interestingly, I've been writing in capitals for the past 2, 3, 4 years because I thought I'd lost the ability to write in cursive, but actually I just, halfway through, I switched and it felt quite comfortable. I'm not sure why I'm mentioning that, but it was just a thing I noticed. It's the first time in a long time that I've written normally instead of in capitals. What else? What else did it feel like? So I noticed I write things as lists. So I asked myself, how well have I looked after myself for the last few days? And I instantly broke it down into what's my exercise been like, nutrition, what's my mental health been like, what's my sleep been like. And I've looked at each of those individually and then I've categorized down. So, you know, I've listed for exercise, I taught my Saturday spin class. I did 2 on Monday. I had a gym session with a friend this morning, but I skipped exercise on Sunday. And one of the things I noticed was that I'm still not doing deadlifts or squats. Just a thought on that it's a thing I've been intending to do for a very long time, just like I've been intending to journal for a very long time, but I've not gone into it. So that's the thing I came back to look at. And I did the same with nutrition and my mental health and sleep. And again, broke those down and then looked for the things that I had wanted to do but hadn't done. So the stuff that I was missing. And then I asked, why am I missing it? Why am I not doing it? So for instance, why have I not been taking my regular supplements this week? What's been going on? What's been getting in the way? And so I analysed that a little bit. I tried to analyse why I'm not deadlifting and squatting, which of course are really big exercises, great for the body. I've written down a whole bunch of reasons. Some didn't really ring true, but potentially, like it feels like hard work. They're not fun. It feels like I've gone backwards in strength. So why would I want to do a thing where I'm suddenly feeling weaker than I used to be? So I'm avoiding feeling like I've stepped backwards or that I'm failing. And then I took it to the next step, which is, well, this is a thing, do I actually want to do this? Do I really want this? Or is this just one of those things that we tell ourselves? Are there any real benefits with this? Or is this just a should in my head? And actually, I think I do want to do it. It's a thing I do have done in the past quite regularly. I've built it into my routines in the past, especially when I first started exercising about 15 years ago. And things that work well for me that I know is getting someone to work out with, getting something regular, so maybe just once a week, rather than thinking I need to be doing squatting and deadlifting, just thinking, okay, Tuesdays, that's the only thing I'm going to focus on, and I'm just going to do it once per week. I'm not going to try to put any pressure on beyond that. 1 day per week doing it, and I'm going to keep it really small. And maybe track the progress. So back when I first started, I realized that I was doing what's called undulating periodization, where we change the style of training each week, and then after 4 weeks, you bring it back around to the first style again. And that worked really well for me. It gave me some structure, it gave me a little plan, and I could record exactly what I'd done, and I could see where I was making progress and where I could, where I needed to change something to improve. So I think I'm actually going to give that a go, and I'll let you know how that goes. So my next question is, did I learn anything about myself? So this is the question to ask yourself. Did you learn anything about yourself from writing down? I can't say I had any great insights from doing it today. I've certainly listed off a bunch of reasons, but these are not reasons that I've not thought before. So no, didn't learn anything particularly new, but just writing it down has been helpful because actually I've realised that I do want to do this stuff and I've just been avoiding it. So I'm going to see if that's enough just to get me doing it. And if I still don't start doing the squatting and deadlifting, then I can come back to it and I can start analysing what's got in the way. Because now I know I want to do it, we can see. And the final question is, will it change anything for the future? So you've done 15 minutes, we've had a look at how we did and didn't look after ourselves this in the last few days, in the last week. Will I be doing anything different in the future? Well, yes, I'm definitely going to have a go at sticking in one day. I'm going to write a little plan of what the undulating periodization will look like. And I'm going to give it a go. So yes, I'm going to do something different, and I'm going to tell myself that this is something I actually want to do. It's not something I should do or feel like I have to do. It's just going to be something that I'm going to do. So that's it for today. If you fancy joining in tomorrow, I'll be back on at 12:30. I'll talk a lot less tomorrow. So it'll just be a little short intro on something specific, and then we'll get stuck in. As always, you can just do your own thing. You can do free writing, or you can go with the topic that I talk about and use my prompt question. Either way, it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes of your time out of the day at lunchtime to just do some journaling. Right, see you tomorrow.